Welcome everyone to another edition of our LinkedIn live streams. My name is Scott Dunn. You might already know that, but you might not be here to see me because we'll be doing another interview today, this time with Ben Rodilitz. Just want to remind everyone who's showing up before we dive into really the main event. Just part of the reason we're doing this, stay connected, be of service. These LinkedIn live sessions are meant to offer practical, from the trenches advice, tips, whether that's at the leadership level, the transformation level. Last week with Paul Moore on technical practices level. You can find out a lot more on r9.live. Anything that's being brought up, we'll be sharing there, as well as if you're watching this from YouTube, do look at the other videos from LinkedIn Live or other related topical things. You'll find lots of other good stuff. There's over 100 videos there. Hopefully that's of some help to figure out what is your next step. What does that look like for you? So I am going to keep an eye on our live stream for questions that come up. So you can leave a comment below. Also, subscribe to YouTube, and that way you'll get notified of the videos from our future sessions that get put up kind of proactively, and you can know what's going on and what's coming up. So I'm going to slide over and make room for Ben Rodilitz. Welcome, Ben.
Hey, Scott, how you doing?
Great. Glad you could join us today. One reason, a little bit about Ben, and I'll have Ben share a little bit more about Ben, but one reason Ben was one of the first people on my list. I've known Ben Rodilitz for a long time. He's one of the coaches that I feel, whether you're talking about leadership and interacting with leaders or management level or very large transformations, or all the way down to how do individual team members feel and react to this change or the nature of their work. He's got a technical background. It just felt like Ben was always equally comfortable talking about any of that. And despite all that knowledge and experience he has, very, very personable, humorous. I was just joking with him that I feel like I'm always seeing him with a smile on his face. So it's great because sometimes there's experts out there who let you know they're experts. Ben is absolutely not that. He's an expert that you wouldn't know until you start asking questions like, holy cow, he knows a whole lot. And he's got a lot of real good insights into ways of thinking about what we do that are both, I feel, novel. You don't see it a lot in the people I talk to, as well as just easy to understand and even kind of makes that fun. So that's part of what we're talking about, what we'd like to get into today with some of those areas. But Ben, can you add on a little bit more? So people who don't know you, can you tell us a little bit more about Ben Rodilitz?
Sure. I long time ago was a developer, wrote embedded code. In fact, wrote some code for some of the first commercial GPS receivers, which was kind of neat. And that kind of grounded me in when I later got to learn more about Agile, some of the benefits for the development community. In between, I did some of the really normal waterfall type stuff. I was going to say I made a good living doing requirements analysis and writing all those XRDs, the MRDs, PRDs. I ran that CV by my wife, and she said that part about the requirements analysis. Why don't you just say you made a living? I don't remember you making a good living doing that. But I got into a disagreement at another GPS company where I thought I should still work there, and they didn't, and they won that argument. And that gave me some time to reflect on. At that point, I was in traditional project management. Went the PMP route, but also discovered this adorable Agile stuff. So I am a recovering Gantt head, and the stuff that I found in Agile ways of working so resonated with little bits of things that I had been doing for the 20 years prior to it. But it took people smarter than me to put it together into kind of a coherent, cogent way. So for the last decade plus, I've been doing that. And as you said, I've worked with startups and I've worked with big companies like Chevron and Google, and find that there are benefits to what we do on all of them. And in terms of knowing what I know, man, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. I mean, in the industry, as well as the people I work with, I tell every client when I end that I am better at what I do than when I came here because of what you helped me learn and bring up different things.
It's such a great space. If you like learning and if you like relationships, people, the people aspect of what we do, Agile is such a great spot. So I know part of what we're talking about plenty of areas that are of interest to you to talk about, but I'd like to peel away just what you're talking about, having been in the trenches, and I've been there before on doing all this work and thinking, I don't know if this is really working, going the PMP route. So here's this whole new world of Agile. And yes, it's packaged certain ways by certain people to make it easier to understand. At the same time, sometimes that whole new package of terminology and things for people who maybe aren't new to it, you've mentioned a few times and shared with others on the leadership alumni call about let's just do away with all that. And I'm almost like we don't even need to go there with all this terminology. Can you share a little bit more about what is that about? How did that come about, and how do you see that working as you're out there helping other companies, move towards more agility?
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about do you impose different agile frameworks on people and the like, and I get the discussion, and at its core, it's a really great theory. If you have the way of working with a group and saying we're going to let you figure out how we're going to do this. If you're starting from scratch, I think that's a great idea. The opportunities that I have found over the last decade very rarely allow me to start there. They're almost always, we're doing agile and it isn't working. We've had coaches and we didn't like them. And normally, you asked how we got to this, kind of unpeeling the onion. It got back to this why. I mean, we've talked a lot about outcomes over outputs and talking about what is it we're trying to do as opposed to how do we do that. And too many implementations go off on the wrong path from the very beginning because they start talking about what they're going to do. We're going to do Scrum. We're going to do Safe. And what I found is if I can avoid Agile speak at the beginning, then letting the clients understand the why that we're doing the things that we're doing make a ton more sense. For instance, if I'm talking just in general, usually leadership, but just in general, I'll ask them, how does this step-by-step sound? Let's take your work, let's prioritize it. Let's break it into some smaller chunks so that when we're done with the little chunks, we're actually putting that out into the wild quicker. But let's shorten the feedback loop so that people can take a look at what you've done a little bit at a time. And if you're going wrong, fix it, change it. If you see something new, add it. Or if everything's fine, then go down to the next thing on the next priority list. How does that sound? That sounds like a pretty clever idea. Okay, I've got some different ways of doing that. And now we can start talking about say Scrum.
Right.
And then when we're doing Scrum, we can say, well, remember what we talked about here? Well, this is why we're doing a refinement, right? When you're doing the planning, this is why we do the planning. This is the review. Remember that, shorten the feedback and get that we're actually going to do a demo's part of it. We're going to do a review. So remember the non-agile talk we had before,
Mm-hmm.
right? So with leadership, that seems to be a pretty effective way to start, but it works at all levels. I love working with the product people because the product people will say, the inmates are running the asylum, right? I used to be able to say, here's what I want. My project manager would make the work breakdown structure, and I know when I would get the stuff, and I knew exactly where we were going. So my first, sometimes snarky question is, how'd that work out for you? Right? Because it didn't. It didn't. So the question I'll ask a product person, and it's a great question to ask them because I know the answer I'm going to get is, do you ever get smarter? And this came probably the pivotal thing for a moment for me to move into agility from my PMP background was the software project manager's bridge to agility
Oh yeah.
by Slager and Broderick. And there they mapped the PMBOK to agile concepts. And that was what I needed because I was of that mindset, oh, this is just the Wild West. We're going to go do what we can do. And I like sometimes when I talk to real agile fundamentalists and say, oh, yeah, remember when we did waterfall, we had the PMBOK and the 9 knowledge areas. Isn't it neat that we don't have to worry about, which are the ones now we don't have to worry about? Well, it's a trick question because every one of those knowledge areas is important to consider. We need to talk about some level of schedule. We need to talk about scope. We need to talk about risk. We just do it differently and I think more effectively, but we don't lose that. So now when I talk to product people, it was the line in Slager's book that said, "You never know less about a project than at the beginning,"
Yeah.
meaning you always are getting information. And most people listening to us chatting here have had the burden of change control boards because we invested so much in the upfront design in description. We put so much into making the project plan
Hmm.
that now if we want to deviate from it, that is such a big difference. We have critical paths and everything. We need to have a meeting to decide to do what we think is the right thing,
Right.
right? So if I talk to a product person and say, well, you learn, you get better, there are things you may want to take out, there are things you may want to reprioritize, you may want to release earlier or later. All of those things resonate with product folks. And now you can start talking about Scrum. You can talk about a scaling if you need to scale, because now there's a reason to do that.
Right.
So that's how I talk to the product folks.
I think that
And
the
then
interesting thing you mentioned about the leadership, and I would add product to this as well in general, is they probably haven't been trained. They don't know this terminology. Uh, and sometimes, maybe you've seen before, I've seen this a few times, that look, we had a bad experience trying to go agile before, right? And we just don't really want to use that, or because you could just describe everything you did about let's just prioritize and take a small chunk, and they probably could respond like, "Oh, that sounds so much better than what we're doing before. We're doing Scrum before, and it was a nightmare, right?" So it sounds like some of this can get over sometimes the prior bad experiences that they might have, and almost like this, you get radioactive around some of those terms. Is that helpful in that way?
yeah, but it's even not only the bad experience they had with Agile, but just the bad experience they had in general. I mean, I love working with those squirrely developers. I guess I'm being redundant. I can say that because I was one of them. And it's the same thing. It's like uh, meetings, right? We've never ever heard that when we go in. I have all these meetings, and now I have five more meetings or rituals or ceremonies. I don't care what you call them. And the initial pushback is to go into Scrum talk, into Agile talk, and say, well, here's what we're doing it. And I found working with developers, the first thing to do is agree with them. I absolutely agree that the 15 minutes we're in stand up, if instead of in stand up, your fingers were on the keyboard, you would be doing more work, right? So I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah.
Here's the question I have for you. Have you ever worked on a project and halfway through towards the end, a bunch of your work got thrown out? Well, we all have. I mean, I know the answer to that. It's like, good lawyer never asks a question you don't know the answer to, right? We know that. Or did you ever finish a project and leadership said, no, these things are all wrong. You need to do this, fix these things. And they're big fixes because you found out so late. Or worse, you release it and the customer didn't like it, right? And I'll ask the developers, how did you feel? How did that make you feel, right? If the answer is, I don't care, there ain't no Agile's going to fix that problem, right? But if they do feel bad about it, and most of us did, when it happened, because it did happen, then you say, okay, now let's talk about these things that we're going to do that are going to take a little time away, but are going to be dimes on the dollar in terms of making sure. So the goal is not to do more work, the goal is to do more of the right work. And we're going to mitigate. You're always going to there's always going to be stuff where you misunderstood and you did something that wasn't what the customer, your stakeholder wanted you to do. But we're going to shorten that time so the refactoring, the fixing is a lot smaller. Does that make sense? And because of that, we're going to, all the memes, right? Go slow to go fast, right? We're going to work on a way that you're more sure and your stakeholders are more sure that you're on the right track. And that's going to, now I think we're on the right track with the development, with the delivery folks to say, and also there's just that psychological thing. If you're breaking things into smaller groups and it can go out, they're seeing success a lot quicker, right? And that's pretty cool.
Oh
That's
yeah.
pretty cool as a developer.
Yeah. I think
So
there's. You're. Go ahead.
no, go ahead, Scott.
You're reminding me. There's a lot of fundamental parts on the team dynamics that really, for me, when I was first starting out, and coming from a developer background as well, I absolutely relate to what you say. Is it's very discouraging, frustrating, disheartening to watch your work get thrown away or be told it's wrong, and all the stuff we ran to. And you're right. Normally, we're finding out near UAT, right near the end of those phases, after months worth of work, only to just be wrong some percentage of the scale, and it's just terrible. It's you can have that sense of foreboding when no one's seen it for a long time. So for me, coming into Scrum and Agile was so, it was just revitalizing to say development can be enjoyable. We're already learning, but it's how neat to build stuff and then have the people we're giving it to like it and give us feedback. And of course they have other ideas, but we're never like terribly wrong. It got built in that we're never wrong. The product owner just didn't, understand some aspect, but we were never like, commonly IT got the brunt of those blows. So for me, it's personal, but I think sometimes we move so far into the structures and the meetings and the processes. We have some of these wars about which process. Like we forget the point is you fundamentally change how the bulk of the people involved show up feeling better about their work, feeling motivated again, right? And the difference of a motivated employee or developer compared to one who just hates their job. And I think you see some of this now, and this isn't one of our topics, but I'd love to pick it up later. You're seeing it now that it's a wide open marketplace. That I can just get a job as a developer anywhere in the United States like tomorrow. What it's just radically changing. Like, is it enjoyable to work there or not? Do I love what you guys are doing and the mission and vision of that? But if not, I can pull chalks and go anywhere, anytime now. It's not just what other jobs are right in my my little city. So that's interesting. The other thing I wanted to bring up is, as part of all that, do you see what's your experience of how management and leadership responds, both in ways that you see that were great and ways that you see that were, there's a gap there. I wish this could have looked a little different, from the leadership and management perspective, which we're camped out a bit. What's been your experience there with the change?
Yeah, it's because we'll set expectations at the beginning. It's been almost always really, really good, and good, but in different ways. I mean, I want to think. I'm thinking about Chevron, which I worked in. Basically, they had four pillars, and I was working with four basically uh, not directors, but they had a group of teams under them, and they had different expectations of what was going to happen there. So what I asked them was, I said, for now I'm only going to be here 3 or 4 months, and in 3 or 4 months, and I mentioned their common leadership, are going to ask you, how did Ben do? And you're going to say, hopefully, man, Ben did a great job. I'm seeing, and I want you to tell me A, B, and C that you want to be able to say in 3 or 4 months, right? Remember the future. If you start off with that, because these people had completely different, these four sponsors, one guy said, you're my fifth coach. I came up with this term, Jack, just another coach. You're my fourth or fifth coach. And he said, I don't want the Wild West. I don't want this self-organizing, do what you want, figure out how it works, whatever, and then all my teams are doing completely different stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a great place to start. So we talked a little bit about, the tyranny of best practices as opposed to best examples.
Yes.
But I said, so I would like to, here's why I think some of that health self-organization is important. I understand what you want. Let's talk about, it was probably only 3 whys as to why that's a problem for you. And what we wound up coming up with, he goes, I get what you're saying. Here's the deal. Each team can pick something different. I want each of them to pick one thing they're going to get better at.
Nice.
And I want your term, he said to me, your term acceptance criteria. I'd like to know how we're going to measure that. And it was perfect. This guy was so hard to work with, seemingly in the first couple of minutes, and by the end of that first discussion, we knew where we were going. Another group said, I want to get workout. I want them to be more predictable. Another one said, the team is not working together very well. I want them to work together well. So each of them had a different element, but we got that out front. So I didn't come in with now it was a ton of work for me, because I couldn't do my one size fits all, the large consulting company. I'm not going to pick on any one specifically, but I'm not going to drop a 72-page playbook on you and say, here are all the things that you need to fix. I'm going to say, so I had to, we talked a little bit about this before. I'm a SAFE certified and, enabled instructor to try to do their 2-day trainings. And I've gone from 2-day to 1-day, not safe, but I've created 5, 10, 15-minute in a nutshell, because that for me seems to be what people get. I went through Sharon Bowman's training from the back of the room training, and that was very impactful. That if you want stuff to stick, you've got to do things differently than we normally do that.
Yeah.
So
tell us a little bit more about that, because you brought this up before about targeted, it's at the right time, small little chunks. So give us an example of how that's played out, what that might look like for those who they think they need to go to 2 full days of training. Tell us about the scenario when that plays out, that they got just a chunk at that time, how that played out.
Yeah. So I had a couple teams. I'm finding more and more teams are mushing. This is Scrum specific, mushing the review, the retro, and the planning together,
Hmm.
putting them in different order, cramming them together. So I did a little 5 or 10 minute uh, training lit. Maybe I'll patent that word or whatever. Um, that was end of sprint flow, and it basically said you do your review, you get and it's not just a demo, it's a review, and the key part of that's the feedback, right? I heard a great line, Scott. Somebody said if you've done 2 or 3 sprint reviews in a row where your backlog didn't change, you're not having impactful reviews.
Oh, yes.
So the feedback you get should make sense change. Okay, so now you've done that. Now you have the retro. Well, the retro should be, it's very possible some of the things that happen in that review are going to be input into that retro,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Some of the statistics, how did we do on the last sprint? We didn't get a lot of stuff done. Why didn't we? That can be part of your retro. So and so from this group said that wasn't what I expected. Okay, let's talk about in the retro. So that's the input into the retro. Now you do the retro, and now you're going to go to your planning. Well, there's a very good chance that something that came out of that retro and certainly something that came from the review is going to affect your backlog. But the retro may change the way you do your review. You may take in a little less work or more work. So just by talking about that flow and understanding that there's input, the output of one is an input to the other, starts getting you thinking that these are not 3 things that are all one mushed together. And if you can, it's really getting harder to get 3 distinct times set up. So I understand why you
Yes.
may do your review and your planning together. But if you have time to incubate with that information, I mean, we see it a lot. People will end a sprint, close the sprint at sprint planning.
Yes.
Okay. Well, where's the time to decide what to do with those stories that aren't done? Right? This story isn't done. Well, I don't need it anymore. Put it in the backlog. This story isn't done. Holy mackerel, it's way too big. Maybe we ought to split it. Where is that time for product owner or anybody on the team to say, maybe we need to do something different? If you, instead of just saying, well, we'll roll it into the next round. So that's an example. When I saw 1 or 2 teams mushing these things together, giving them again the why. I hate to beat that drum, but they understand why we do these separately. Then maybe we'll get a better idea of how to break them down.
We don't need no stinking why. Just do it. Just follow the process. I love
Yeah,
I love the pragmatic view. Um, one of the other items we won't get to it today because I still want to make sure that people know how to get a hold of you, and follow up with you, stay connected. And that was about how do we work with those who are resistant, and anyone who does go and look you up, they're going to notice that your title is Agile Chiropractor. So I'd love to hear that story. But for now, how if
yeah.
people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that? I think I pulled up your LinkedIn profile. Is that a good spot to go? There it is.
Yeah, LinkedIn is the best place. I would love for any of you who want to connect with me. I would ask that you just say, hey, by the way, the reason I saw you talking to Scott, and man, I really disagree with a bunch of what you said. I'd like to talk to you more. If you just give me a little hint as to why it is, other than I am selling Scrum training and your name popped up, that would be great. I'm on Twitter, and I'm going to try to use Twitter a little more at Ben Rodilitz, but you'll find me either. The nice thing about having a name like Rodilitz is although my son is now teaching at UCLA, so there's another Rodilitz in the ether.
Oh
But
no. Oh no.
yeah, but you'll be easy to find me. Hey, can I end off with one quick a thing on metrics for resistors? It's a lean metric, but it's different from lean from what you think. And I call this the Tony metric because it was a guy named Tony, and I started talking about this stuff, and he was like this. He was sitting back, his arms were crossed, and within a month and a half, he was leaning in. So that's my lean metric. I'd like to
No,
be able
that's
to take the angle that you're sitting in, and because I'm quite convinced that angle is directly proportional to how much you're unresisting. So
that is a first. I will credit you. Will be credited. I love it. That's gonna have to go on the list though. I'm gonna add
a
that to my
new a
boards.
new lean metric.
Well, awesome, Ben. I love all that you're bringing. It's ideas and it's real world experience and stories around that, which I know people love. I know there's a lot more there, so I'm going to beg, borrow, manipulate, whatever I need to do, guilt you into coming back. So I'd love to continue in the same way with those other pieces. I know we have a limited piece of your time for today, though. So for now, I'll just end it with that. Say thank you very much, Ben Rodilitz. And I'll be, hopefully everyone will be seeing Ben again, but you have his contact information on LinkedIn. Look for Ben Rodilitz, at Ben Rodilitz on Twitter. And stay tuned for other interviews. So folks that I just call it my old friends category. I just like to talk with them. We just happen to record it and share it with others, but it's enjoyable for me. So for now, we'll say goodbye to Ben, and hopefully we'll see him again. For everyone else, we will be hopefully seeing you guys all in the future. Thank you for joining. Stay tuned for more, and good luck on your Agile journey.
Take care, everybody.